Fantastic, folks. We're back. We're back with a makeup show. Oh, yeah. It is good to see you. So it's a pre-recorded show. And we're back with a little bit of Bob to start us off from the Virginia Democratic Small Business Talking Show. Live coming at you. Oh, we got a great guest. We got a great guest coming back. He missed us a little earlier, but we're glad to have him back on the show. Virginia State Senator Scott Surovell is our makeup. He's back. He's got stuff to tell you. He's right with us. Pro voting rights, pro good Democrat. And I'm about to start it right away as we bring Bob down a little bit. And I'm going to tell you a little bit about our state senator, Scott Surovell, who is here from the beautiful state of Virginia. Democrat, hanging in there and holding it down for all of us, folks. So first of all, I just want to say thank you. I hope everybody's well. Our show will be a little bit different, a little bit shorter today, because we're going to go right into this interview with State Senator Scott Surovell. But before I do, I'm going to tell you a little bit about this guy. I've known him for a very long time. Let me get my chair straight. That's right. This is an MSNBC. This is my library, and I just kind of do it the way I do it. And I hope that you really get a little bit of, get more than a little bit, a lot out of this with Senator Scott Surovell. Let me tell you a little bit about him. So he was elected as the 36th District State Senator in November of 2015. And he was sworn in on January the 13th, 2016, representing Fairfax, Prince William County, and Stafford County in the towns of Occoquan, Dumfries, and Quantico. And also he serves currently as the Transportation, the Commerce, Labor, Judiciary, Privileges, and Elections, and the Rehabilitation and Social Services Committees. So Scott's staying busy. And he was in the Senate Majority Caucus. The Senate Majority Caucus Vice Chair. Also, he serves as serves on the State Water Commission for Virginia, North Carolina High Speed Rail Compact Commission. Also, he works on the Commission on Electric Utility Regulation, Health Insurance Reform Commission, Joint Subcommittee to evaluate tax preferences, and also the Virginia State Crime Commission. He's not done. There's more that this state senator has been doing. He also does Child Support Guidelines Review Panel, Board of Trustees for the Frontier and Culture Museum of Virginia, also the Legislative Support Commission, and the School Facility Modernization Commission. But Scott goes on and on here because he does the Commission on Virginia Alcohol Safety Action Program. And he's also on the Booker T. Washington Commemorative Commission. Well, I guess he does that because Booker T. Washington is a Hampton alumni, just like I am. So, and of course, our beautiful home by the sea down there, the Hampton Institute / it's known as the Hampton University now. And also from 2009 to 2015, Senator Scott Surovell has served as a state delegate for the 44th District. And he did that from 2009 to 2015 before he became a state senator. But also, Senator Surovell has served on the House Caucus, served as the House Caucus chairman from 2014 to 2015, and campaign chairman from 2012 to 2014. I wonder how Scott gets all this done. He's done quite a lot here. This is a pretty impressive record. He's also served in the counties, Cities and Towns Committee and Science and Technology Committee for 6 years, and the Militia, Police, and Public Safety Committee for 4 years. So, folks, Senator Scott Surovell has been doing quite a bit. He was also appointed by the Speaker of the House to serve on the Virginia Broadband Advisory Council from 2014 to 2016. So without further ado, we want to clap him in. We want to bring in State Senator Scott Surovell. How you doing, Scott? Welcome. We got to give you some love coming on to the show.
Hey, man, I'm feeling all right after that Bob Marley and that introduction, man. So
we got to give it a little bit of theatrics, man. You got to keep people interested, man. So, Scott, it's good to see you, man. Thank you for doing this pre-recording with us so all the folks can get to know you a little better. And this is where I just kind of turn the mic over to you and just say, Scott, tell the folks a little bit about you, and more than what I just gave them the basics from your bio. I'm sure you got stuff you want to tell us.
Well, sure. I can tell you a few things. Number one, I'm a native Virginian. I was brought home from the hospital in Washington, D.C. to my parents' house here in Fairfax County. I grew up, went to Fairfax County Public Schools, Holland Hall Elementary School, Waynewood Elementary School, Stephen Foster Intermediate School, West Potomac High School. I was in the very first class to graduate from West Potomac High School in 1989. Then I went to James Madison University, where I graduated in 1993. Then went to law school at UVA in 1996. Came back to practice law in Fairfax County with my father's and a bunch of his partners. We usually have between 13 and 18 partner or lawyers at any one point in time. That's what I do today when I'm not serving the legislature. I do divorces, car accidents, DUIs. I represent some small businesses, sue lots of people. And I've been married for 23 years. I got 4 kids, 2 in college, 2 in at West Potomac.
Okay.
And that's a short version.
Wow. That's right, Scott. I didn't see anything on your bio about your queen and your beautiful kids, man. So you gotta lay that out there early and quick, or you're gonna be in trouble.
2 dogs and 3 cats, and we had a fish. I think the fish passed away recently, but
they never live for long. Well, that's good, man. So you actually, what folks don't know, Scott and I have known each other for a long time. He lives in the same Mount Vernon district that I live in. Even when he was initially running for the delegate, we actually were running in a particular campaign against each other, but I never quite made it all the way in. But Scott was also the chairman of the, he left this out, but I think the local people know this, but other folks don't know that Scott was also chair of the Mount Vernon Democratic Committee, of which I later became a chair many years, 4 years. And then you also became chair of the Fairfax County Democratic Committee, right?
I did. So
you've kind of made it up through the what do you call it? Up from just being a member, working all the way through to actually chairing one of the largest, most influential Democratic committees in the state, the Fairfax County Democratic Committee, FCDC. Yep. And obviously, you were probably part of the Central Committee member at that time, were you?
I was on State Central for about 5 or 6 years, and I chaired the Fairfax Committee the year that President Obama won Virginia, and a Democrat carried Virginia for the first time since Lyndon Johnson's. And that was a big reason why I wanted to do Fairfax, was I felt like that was coming. So I thought we need to do our part.
Well, we got a lot of history together, and you actually were involved in Virginia politics really at a significant way long before I got in, because I really didn't jump in until a little bit before the Obama years, or right at that time. So tell us a little bit about how this journey has been for you as an elected official from a state level, from the delegate to senator to, also I just want to let people know you got to be elected to these other state Democratic committees or the local Democratic organizations. So you've been getting elected for quite some time. A lot of folks know you, where you make a lot of friends, and some people who don't always agree with everything you do, but hey, welcome to Democratic politics.
Yeah, and if you're not making somebody mad, you're not pushing very hard. So
exactly, you don't break some eggs, you're not getting anything done.
Right. Yeah, I mean, Mark, mine has been, politics is always a source of discussion around the dining room table in my house, and my grandparents moved to Fairfax County in 1936 from Brooklyn, and they were a couple of Jews that came down from Brooklyn. My grandfather needed work during the Great Depression, and the WPA was painting people to do murals in federal buildings, and he was an artist. And my grandparents moved to this little dirt road in Fairfax. You might have heard of it, called Gallows Road. And they lived in a farmhouse.
Okay.
And when they got to Fairfax County had 40,000 people in it. And Jews from Brooklyn weren't exactly welcome. and my parents, grandparents weren't really allowed to join the Democratic Party. They didn't like those kinds of Democrats back then. So my grandparents, they actually joined the NAACP. The NAACP was the one that was willing to take them. And they fought school desegregation, and they fought to make Gum Springs a better place and those kinds of issues until the Democratic Party in Fairfax became the Democratic Party we see today. They mainly put those kinds of values in me. And my mother worked in Congress 28 years. And when I graduated college, I'd already interned in Congress a couple times. I became a governor's fellow, which meant I got to follow around somebody at the cabinet level for one summer right after I graduated college. And that really got me a lot more interested in state government than I had been before. And so that's sort of where I got in touch with state government. If I was going to ever run for office, I thought I might one day, but President Bush really got me angry with some of the things he was doing. It's hard to remember how angry people were back then about how things were going, foreign policy and everything else. But that was what prompted me to start re-engaging and getting back involved again. And you're right. And I started getting involved in the party, moved up through the party, and I became a state delegate candidate sort of out of the blue. My Delegate Amundsen just announced her run again right in the middle of her campaign, and they needed a candidate on 24 hours notice. And, I got 3 phone calls and said, we need you to file tomorrow. I was like, me now? I got a trial in a month, and really? And that was kind of how I got roped into running. And I've really enjoyed it. I mean, I feel like it's an extension of my law practice. I represent real people practicing law because I like helping people solve their problems. And I feel like serving in the state legislature, you can help lots of people solve their problems all at once, thousands or millions of people, in fact. So to me, it's very, very rewarding.
The lower elected offices is really the closer you are to the people that you represent coming from their communities. And I know when you ran initially, I forget her name, what's her name again? The lady who was the former delegate.
Chris Amundsen.
Oh, was it
Chris Amundsen was a delegate, and then Toddy Puller was the senator.
That's right. It was the Senate. I'm sorry. That's what I'm thinking of. Toddy was a senator at that time when you ran.
Yeah.
So, so go ahead, tell us more. But you replaced a pretty effective or well-loved senator in Toddy, right?
Yeah. So Toddy, well, first of all, Delegate Amundsen was wonderful too. She served 10 years in the school board before she served another 10 in the House of Delegates. But the $17,400 salary wasn't enough for her. And so she went on and she worked in a bunch of school board associations and education policy institutes. But Toddy Puller, she actually went to high school with Toddy's daughter. And Toddy flipped the delegate seat here in our area back in, I think it was 1991. It had been Republican for a long time up until then. And then when Senator Joe Gartland retired, Toddy took his place. And Toddy was always a forceful advocate for veterans issues. Her husband was a kind of a famous wounded warrior Marine, whose father was the most famous Marine in their history of the Marine Corps. And Toddy, saw the scars of war up front and personal. And she cared very deeply about veterans. She fought very hard about Route 1, which is another passion that I've taken on and continued with. She actually left some pretty big shoes to fill. And, I was lucky that I was able to mentor under her for about 6 years before she ended up not running again. And I could see how it was done. She had a whole devoted following of people who would follow her, to the end. And we're lucky to have her. She's still around, by the way. She hasn't, she's still around, but we don't see her as much
I haven't
anymore.
seen her in a long time. I know she's still with us, but she's probably, I don't know, Toddy's probably my father's age. She's probably in her late 70s, early 80s, something like that.
She's 78. Yeah, 78, 79. Yep.
Absolutely. So what do you think was probably the most significant thing that you really got done when you were a delegate? What would you want to tell the folks about what you did when you were a delegate before you went on to be senator on the state level?
When I was a delegate, or when I was a delegate? Wow, that's a long time ago. You're taking me back like 7 years. when I was a delegate, you got to remember we were in the super minority.
Yes.
And I was one of between 31 and 32 most of the time I was there. We had 39 my first 2 years. Then we got pushed back after redistricting to like 31 seats.
Right.
And back then, when you're that far in the minority, it's really hard to be relevant without completely selling your soul. And
right.
And so, my Republican colleagues, they give me one bill a year. And if I had more than one
bill a year, huh?
Yeah. And if I had more than one bill a year that they liked, they would take those bills and give them to their freshmen or their vulnerable members and let them carry those and then kill mine and put somebody else's name on it.
Right.
So
hey, welcome to Politics 101 in the minority.
So, but listen, there's a couple of things I was able to get done on ethics, but I sort of was this last holdout vote on a 99-1 vote, and they finally gave me what I wanted on something because they wanted a unanimous vote to make our ethics law a little better. I did some stuff on FOIA back then, the Freedom of Information Act, which I was proud of. A lot of back then, what you try to do is you try to move the needle. You try and move the dialogue more to your side of the table because they don't want to give you any victories when you're one of 31. And so things really changed though when I got to the Senate. Even when I was in the minority in the Senate, I was able actually to get a lot done in the minority. But once we got in the majority, then I was able to get some really cool stuff done too. So
well, tell us about that. Tell us about your recent stuff then.
Well, a couple of the bills that I'm most proud of, first of all, is I carried the legislation that provided driver privilege cards to about 300,000 undocumented immigrants in Virginia. Okay. And that really changed a lot of people's lives, getting that done. I mean, these are, people that would worry about getting arrested and being deported for driving their kid to the doctor or something. I mean, people need to be able to get to work. And anyway, I was very proud of that. It changed a lot of lives. I've met so many people and their children who just, couldn't be more grateful for that.
Now that particular law, Scott, what was it called? Do you remember what? So,
driver privilege cards. They're actually not driver's licenses.
A little different from a driver's license, but had essentially the same effect. So they weren't driving illegally, right? So they couldn't get arrested or something, right?
Right. That's right. Yeah, they're a tiny bit different. If you look at it, it's really hard to tell the difference. But if you look on the back, there's some codes and stuff that allow you to tell that it's not the same thing. But anyways, that one was a big deal. I passed the law that required Dominion to spend an extra $1 or $2 billion to clean up their coal ash ponds around the entire state. Some of the biggest coal ash ponds are in Prince William County, in my district, which is why I fought so hard on those down in Dumfries, which is probably one of the most diverse parts of Northern Virginia. And it's kind of got that big brownfield down there that needs to get cleaned up. And I passed a law that makes Dominion clean it up right and not cheap. And so
did the EPA or the feds help out a lot with that or what? At all? No,
and actually no, we passed a rule that is more stringent than what the EPA rule is, which is why Dominion has to spend that extra $2 billion. And EPA gave them a whole bunch of different choices. And I said, nah, you're only gonna get two choices. You get the medium choice and the expensive choice. You don't get the cheap choice. And
that's when EPA was underneath a Republican administration, right? Because they did a little better than Democrats, right?
Sort of. I first started working on the law in 2015, right at the end of the Obama administration. And then when Trump came in, he started to try to loosen up the rules. And we passed the law. We're allowed to, when it comes to environmental regulation, we're always allowed to go stricter than the federal government, but we can't go below where they are. And so Trump sort of lowered the floor, and Virginia raised it so that so whatever Trump did didn't matter. Trump administration didn't matter.
Well, a lot of people probably didn't know that about states having more influence on what environmental cleanup happens than what the feds have.
Most states don't use that authority. Okay. Most states just do the bare minimum. They just do whatever the EPA makes them do. They don't go stricter than that.
What's all the fuss about the environmental stuff if in fact they have more of a say than what the feds do? That's kind of funny when you think about it, but go ahead, man. You're telling the story. Go ahead.
Yeah. So like, what else have I done? I passed a law that says you can't have these phones in your hand while you're driving.
Okay.
I think
Good
that's,
law.
yeah, I think that's really important. That went into effect a couple years ago, and I think that's starting to pay some dividends, I hope.
Hopefully it saves a few lives, right?
Yeah. No, tell me about it. I mean, the accidents and deaths and injuries are up every year now for the first time in 50 years, and it's all because people are driving around looking at their phone while they drive. And so we need to get these things out of people's hands and change their behavior.
Right.
So what else have I done? I mean, I pass, usually about 20 or 30 bills a year. I'm just sort of hitting some of the big ones. Last year, I passed a really sort of first in the country methane reduction bill. A lot of people don't realize it, but methane is actually 1/3 of our climate change problem. Methane is basically, what you use to heat your house or run your stove.
Right.
But we get it by fracking. And it's 85 times more potent at capturing greenhouse energy than carbon dioxide.
Oh,
So
really?
methane is like super bad when it escapes out of a pipe.
Right.
But it also, methane is also naturally occurring, right? And it comes out of landfills, it comes out of decomposing leaves. It also does not come from cow farts. It comes from cow burps. So don't let anybody mislead you on that. It's a cow burp. But anyway.
Wait a minute. Don't most of these places, you see them with these pipes burning off methane from these trash dumps or other places?
Yeah.
And when it burns off, it's not as, you'll see those, the flames coming out when they have these pipes coming out of the ground, out of these hills. And that's when it has less of an impact on the environment, correct?
It is, but that turns the methane into CO2. And what my bill does is it says that the gas companies can take that methane that you're seeing flared off, and instead they can put it in pipes and sell it to you so you can use to heat your house or run your stove instead of just burning it off. And that way you don't have to use fracked methane that we mine out of the ground to heat your home or whatever. We use biological methane, which is going to otherwise be floating around. And there's a lot of it we can capture. We can capture it by putting capture systems on top of these like pig farms and cow farms. We can put it on sewage plants. We can put it on top of landfills, right? There's some states that where you're required to take your food scraps and put it in a different can. They take that, they throw it in a big tub and make methane out of it instead of taking it to the landfill. So these are the kinds of things that my bill authorizes, because we got to get methane under control. It's not just about CO2, it's also methane.
Now, it's either Virginia or not Virginia, but either Maryland or DC. I think it was Maryland that recently came up with a law that not only does it separate your recyclables and your regular trash, but also your garbage. They have a third can to do exactly what you're talking about. But you have to get the public to do that, and the companies that actually pick up the stuff. So it's a bit of a challenge to get that implemented, right?
No, that's exactly right. It takes time. It takes time to get people's behavior modified. But I believe in Maryland, they've mandated it for some of the large food producers, like big restaurants or cafeterias, or like the chicken plants. But in Vermont, it's against the law to put any kind of food in your trash. You either have to.
Does most of it come from these large, food processing places, or does it come from the general public just dumping their trash?
You're talking about in Maryland, or you're talking about methane?
Well, just methane in general. I mean, you brought it up, so
the bulk of methane emissions, that the cheapest methane emissions to solve are leaks on wellheads or on pipelines. And part of my bill allows them to go through and purchase methane that's certified to come from non-leaky wells, and to fly drones over top of pipelines to plug those last leaks. Then third part of my bill says the gas companies can build these other systems to manufacture and capture biological methane, which is the stuff we've been talking about, and put that in their pipes instead of the fracked methane. And that's a more long-term project. But for example, in Arlington, they want to take the methane off of their sewage plant, capture it, and then use it to run their buses. Diesel.
In the end, it pays for it over time. It pays for that service to get set up, but there has to be some money invested to get it started, right?
Right, that's right. But by allowing the gas companies my bill allows the gas companies to make investments in those projects and then to recover the cost of it from their ratepayers as part of them selling gas to you. So it becomes part of their system. So, for example, they would run a line to the Fairfax County landfill to the methane capture system on the landfill, and then they can charge customers in part for that. And that way they're not using this fracked gas.
Okay. Well, that makes sense over time, as long as they're saving money. Well, let me ask you about the other stuff. Oh, wait a minute! I just saw something. I just saw. Well, this is just general news. It looks like the Democrats just won the governorship in Arizona. So that's a little bit something to cap about Democrats. All right, we're going to announce on Scott's rebroadcast. But go ahead. What's the next thing you were going to cover?
Well, I mean, I think you want to talk about voting a little bit, and if you want to talk about a crazy governor who hates voting, talk about that Arizona governor, Kerry Lake. But
well, she's not going to be governor now, so that's not going to happen.
Yeah. Thankfully.
Well, I did want to talk to you about really a little more now that the Democrats, and we'll talk a little more about Virginia first because you're a Virginia Democrat. What's your projection on, one, how you feel whether or not in another, 2 years, or is it one more year? It's 2 years for delegates, or is it 6 years for senators when they have to get reelected, right?
4
years for delegates?
No, and 2 for delegates, 4 for senators.
4 for senators, that's what I thought. So right now, Virginia does not control the House of Delegates. And that election is coming up next year.
And
right?
The Senate.
And the Senate. It's coming up next year. So what's your view on what we are going to be able to do first in the House of Delegates? You think we're positioned well to recapture that, or do you think we're going to be affected by the redistricting things that have occurred?
I haven't studied their map super closely, but from what I've looked at, I mean the Senate map I know in exquisite detail, but the House map I know pretty well. But I think they've got an excellent chance to bring things back. I want to say they have 62 seats that President Biden won. And if you look at, and my suspicion is there was probably about 60 seats that congressional candidates won on Tuesday last week, a week ago.
Right.
And they've had a really good recruiting class. They've got a lot of Republican incumbents who are doubled up. And I think they're positioned pretty well to take a shot at getting back in the majority. So I like their chances. They didn't have many incumbents that got drawn into bad seats. There's not many Democrats that got drawn into bad seats. There's only one or two. So, and there's a bunch of Republican incumbents that got drawn into bad seats. And remember, we didn't do this. This is what the Supreme Court did, right? I mean, this wasn't a political gerrymandering. Right. The Senate, I'm also, one of the things you didn't mention is I'm also the Senate campaign chairman. And our congressional candidates on Tuesday won at least 23, probably by the time the dust is cleared, 24 of the state Senate seats. Right. And that's about 3 or 4 more than Governor McAuliffe won when he ran 2 years ago. And I'm really excited about several of the candidates that we have. We actually have a special election that's about to kick off. I'm not sure if you saw, but Aaron Rouse just kicked off his campaign in Virginia Beach today. That is necessary because Senator Kiggins just got elected to Congress. And so that we have an open Senate seat down there where we have a chance to get ourselves up to 22. And Aaron, I'm not sure if you've met Aaron yet, but he grew up in Virginia Beach. He played football at Virginia Tech, played for the Green Bay Packers, New York Giants, came back home. He's been running a successful charity down there. He got elected to the Virginia Beach City Council, and now he's running for the Senate. And he's a very impressive guy, and I'm really excited about his chances in the special election that we're going to have in probably about 8 weeks, probably. The date hasn't been declared yet,
but he's in a newly created district, though, right? Is what you're saying, or is he replacing someone else?
Sort of. Under the Constitution, he has to actually run under the old lines for the special election, and then run under the new lines for the November 2023 election. Okay. And the Elaine Luria won in the district he's running in right now. She won it with, I think, about 52% of the vote or so. In the race for next year, in the newly drawn district, I think Elaine Lurie got like 55, 56%. It's a brand new minority influence seat that got drawn in Virginia Beach. And
Right.
it's that if we don't win that seat, we're not going to be anywhere in the majority. So, anyways, I'm really excited for Aaron. He's got to get through this little firehouse primary first, and then the special election. But that's just one of the seats. But there's 2 Republican incumbents that got drawn into very Democratic seats. There's one outside of Henrico. There's one in Loudoun and Fauquier. There's a brand new Senate seat in Northern Prince William, which has been voting democratically.
Right.
So there's a new seat around the city of Fredericksburg, and Fredericksburg has been the fastest growing part of this state, and that seat also voted for Abigail Spanberger by about 4 or 5%. So I think we have a couple of our incumbents that got drawn into really bad seats, but we also have a lot of opportunities in terms of pickups, and we have very few. We only have 2 incumbents that got drawn together, and that's actually been one of the big disappointments. Is the two most senior African American legislators in the entire General Assembly got drawn together. And we've all been hoping they could figure out a way to one of them move so we wouldn't have to have this collision. But I don't know. It's looking less and less. No, it's looking less and less. They could.
Who are we talking about again? Just so folks know, if you remember.
Senator Louise Lucas and Delegate and Senator Lionel Spruill.
Oh, I didn't know that Lionel and Louise were the 2 of the folks. I knew one of them was Louise. I didn't know who the other person was. Okay. All right.
Yeah.
And so they haven't worked that out yet. Something's going to happen.
They haven't worked it out. I'm not sure they're going to work it out. We'll see.
I don't think they can work it out, So
well, there's opportunities. One of them could move and not lose seniority, but I just don't think it's going to happen. There's the other seat to move to is like it's actually a seat we could win, but it's going to be a real tough campaign
to win it, but it's currently held by the opposition.
It's a new seat. There's a new seat
altogether. Okay.
There's a new seat on newish. It's 60% of Senator Lucas's old district, and then 40% of a bunch of other things. But it's been voting like for Democrats some years, Republicans other years. It's 40% African American. It's the sort of rural area along the North Carolina border.
Okay.
The Republicans have a state delegate who's hopping up to run there, and then there's a NASCAR driver who's going to primary her, and then Delegate Clint Jenkins, I think, has said he's going to run there. He hasn't officially declared yet, but he's the obvious person to run. But
Clint was down in Virginia Beach, though, right? Clint Jenkins?
Suffolk,
that's right. Suffolk. Okay, yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
So another question for you. I'm going to change the subject a little bit. But before I go to the one subject I want to talk to you about, I'm going to stick on Virginia one more time. Now that we used to control all executive offices in Virginia, we had a majority in the House and the Senate. If we get that back again, there was a lot of things out there having to do with small businesses, particularly getting better opportunities for African American small business, really trying to model some of the laws that are on a federal state basis where a certain percentage for services and products in Virginia they'll definitely do business with African American owned business. And let me ask you about that. There were some things that got started during the COVID time and some studies that occurred, but I really haven't been able to keep completely up to date on that. What sort of news can you tell me where that actually sits right now?
Well, first of all, Governor Northam created a minority business commission. I think it was his idea. He signed the bill. I think Delegate Torian carried it, but that's a commission that's specifically focused on these kinds of issues, and they're there to sort of come up with ideas and meet and vet ideas to give a lot of these concepts you're talking about more momentum going into sessions. So there's less questions at session. Sort of skids will be greased when the bill shows up to pass. And so we did create
a question of equity for minority-owned business, African-American-owned business specifically. But go ahead. I interrupt you. Go ahead and finish what you're going to say.
Yeah, well, we created that commission to vet these issues, to sort of just have a place to talk about them outside of session so that they'll move quicker. So we did create that. Delegate Juwan Ward, who she is the former chairman of the House Labor and Commerce Committee, which is in the Senate we have the Commerce and Labor Committee. In the House they changed the name and they call it the Labor and Commerce Committee. Anyway, she carried a bill to look at a small business procurement enhancement system in, I want to say it was in 20. She carried something, and then that turned into a bill later, and it literally died on like the last day of session because the Republicans wouldn't take a vote to let us have a final vote on it. We needed like one more day, or we needed the Republicans to say, okay, we let you take a vote, and then it'll pass. And they refused to do that. The bill got
even when we were in the majority, we couldn't do it. Yeah,
well, I can't remember. I'm having to think back to what exactly happened, but the bill had some kind of the bill got screwed up somehow during session, and then the governor sent down a bill really late. And in order for a bill to get a final vote, it has to be on the floor for at least 3 days. And so that means the fastest you can pass a bill once it's introduced is like 5 days, unless the minority is willing to waive that rule.
Okay.
And so we needed like one more day. We either needed to be there one more day, or we needed the Republicans to waive that rule. It takes an 80% vote of the body, and they refused to waive that vote. And so we couldn't take that last vote, and it didn't pass. And then after that, we lost the majority, and all that work went away. And that was a bill that would have created some more longer lasting, long-term equity provisions. And we were in the middle of.
Hey Scott, you kind of the last 3 or 4 seconds of what you said, you got that spinning thing happen, so we didn't hear you. Say it again. It's the internet. It's not your fault.
I got it. Well, what I said was it was really close to passing.
Right.
And after we didn't get that vote that last day, session ended. Then we lost the majority, and then my Republican colleagues have no interest in passing that, and so all that work, went poof.
Okay.
So,
but even though we held the Senate, so you needed the majority in the House of Delegates prevented that from moving as well. You're saying, or what?
When we finally got the bill into a form that people were in agreement with, we needed either the Republicans to waive the vote for that last day, or we needed one more day of session.
Oh, I got that part. That was a dumb question as I think about it, because that session was over is what you're saying. And then before the new session came in, we lost control of other parts. So nothing was going to happen.
Exactly.
Right.
And, we also, for example, in the whole marijuana legalization discussion, there was a lot of equity provisions wrapped into that.
Well, let me stop you for a second. First of all, I know you politicians mean well, because that was going to be my next question about cannabis instead of marijuana. Marijuana is actually a derogatory term. It's cannabis business, but go ahead.
Right. Well, and it was actually not in necessarily the legalization, but in the retail sale piece of it.
Right.
And the whole cannabis thing is an incredibly complicated thing to pull off. And we tried to get it done in like 2 months or 3 months. And most states that have done it, they usually take a year or two of planning and studying and vetting and having public hearings and letting people say,
Right.
So in any event, the bill the last draft of the bill that was passed, but not passed, it was passed, but it said none of this is going to be the law unless we pass again next year, had a whole lot of equity provisions in it.
Well, equity and expungement, right? Did it have the expungement piece?
Sort of.
Needed to have that. I don't see how you can have multi-site organizations, MSOs. They're going to sell like $3 billion worth of cannabis this year in Virginia, and then turn around and tell people where those cannabis laws or laws were used against to, incarcerate and cause people to lose their jobs or not to be able to think. The expungement piece has to happen.
No, Mark, I know 100%. It's just, you're talking to a lawyer, and
so I that's okay.
But one of my
lawyer.
but one of my bills also that I carried that I'm extraordinarily proud of.
Okay.
Was a bill that I carried with Delegate Charnel Herring.
Okay.
And that bill, starting in 2025, will allow people to seal, not expunge, but seal, that is, hide from the public record, most misdemeanor convictions and felony convictions that are class 5, class 6 felonies down. And there's some limits on how many you can do and good behavior and all that. But in Virginia, nobody's ever been able to seal or expunge a conviction ever until now. And this will allow sealing of that, okay?
Well, there's two things in this, though, Scott, that you got to remember. African Americans and Latinos were disproportionately impacted by these laws, specifically used in a way to incarcerate them, which you well know.
I'm getting to that.
But you're getting there. But go ahead, tell your story.
So in Delegate Herring, the bill I carried with Delegate Herring, part of the for all convictions, you can file a petition if you want, but there were 8 different offenses where your conviction will be sealed automatically. And it's versions of trespassing, petty larceny, and some other stuff. But as part of the compromise on marijuana, Governor Ralph Northam, when he got rid of the penalties for possession, he also added to that at my suggestion, along with Delegate Don Scott, now the minority leader. Okay. He added provisions that will automatically seal a lot of marijuana possession convictions.
Well, let's just say you say marijuana, you mean cannabis, but go ahead.
Cannabis, I'm sorry. Well, in the code it says marijuana, but
I know it's the politicians. But go ahead.
Okay, but it will automatically seal certain cannabis possession convictions. They called it expungement. It's really not expungement. It's really sealing. And actually, I'm a crime commission meeting on Wednesday where we're going to try and clean that up some to try to affect to make it as robust as we thought we were doing. But we'll see in the crime commission meeting whether we have a consensus about that or not with my Republican colleagues. But we did have some of what you talked about and passed it as part of the law when we got rid of the possession penalty.
Well, just to keep things, simple where the goats can get to it, as Joe Madison says, explain to the viewers what is the difference between expungement and sealed. What's the difference, or is there any practical difference?
Both of them are invisible on the public record. So if I were to go and look on the court website and look for like Scott Surovell's, ticket for whatever it is, you wouldn't see it.
Okay, let's say Scott Surovell was trying to get a security clearance, or you were a doctor.
Yeah, you're getting to my point.
Or a professional who's trying to get a clearance or applying for a job, and because they have these archaic laws that were used disproportionately targeting African Americans, they use no more of this product than anyone else because of the racism that exists in the country and the state, have to get by these things. So explain to me, if you are a medical professional or you are someone trying to get a security clearance, will these things be expunged? In my mind, that means that they do not have to say that I was convicted of these things because my record's been cleared. Therefore, it was though it never existed, right?
It depends.
Okay.
Okay. And I'm sorry to give you a lawyer answer, okay? But it depends on what kind of job you're applying for.
Okay.
And so, first of all, expungements in Virginia are only available if you are not guilty. And expungement means it's just gone, and it's almost impossible to try and get that record. I mean, it's like so gone. It's like in some locked up safe somewhere, and good luck trying to even look at it, right?
Right.
Sealing means it's removed from the public record, but there are certain jobs where the employer can ask to see them. Not all jobs, but certain jobs. And one of the exceptions is for federal security clearances. And the reason for that is because the state of Virginia can't hide things, can't tell the federal government what it can look at or what it can see. The FBI knows everything. And once it's out there in the public record, the FBI knows about it forever. Right. So, but there's a lot of other people that apply for jobs where it's like, why do you need to know if somebody had a drunk in public? Why do you need to know if somebody had, even some drug possession charges? Why do you need to know that if they're going to be pushing a lawnmower, or they're going to be, working, working in a restaurant or being an ABC manager. I mean, these are some jobs you don't need to know that. And Virginia
or if they're
has
a college student and they were accused of having one cannabis cigarette in common parlance, it's known as a joint. Why would this affect them all of their lives when in fact something happened in a very small amount that they're not selling or whatever? Those sort of things, they're not expunged. Those things are sealed, right?
If it's a conviction, or if they stipulated they were guilty as part of the process, they get sealed. And that's the way it works in most states. They distinguish between sealing and expungement. In Virginia, we've had no sealing. So like you do something, it's out there forever. And any job you apply for, you got to, before you even get in the door, you got to fill out, I have this conviction.
Right.
And with this new law starting in 2025, if you go either file your petition or it happens automatically, no more. Okay.
It happens automatically. You say you file a petition. Which one?
Depends on the crime. As I said, there's about 9 different crimes where it'll happen automatically if you have 7 years good behavior or for traffic offenses. But for other types of crimes in the class 5 and 6 felonies, you have to file a petition.
Okay. Well, this is good information because I know a lot of people, for example, with people trying to get their voting rights back, and I'm going to swerve into this because say someone got stopped and they had a cannabis cigarette or common parlance, a joint, and maybe a half of it was in their thing and they got stopped for whatever reason and they were given a ticket for that because it was illegal. In that case, not knowing all the ins and outs of the laws, that person would lose their right to vote, right? That's what I heard.
Only if it's a felony.
So that's not okay. Go ahead.
Only if it was a felony. For a felony conviction, you lost your right to vote, not misdemeanor.
So that would be, in most cases, that would be considered a misdemeanor.
It would have to be a pretty big cannabis cigarette to get into felony territory.
I don't know. I mean, this is what most people do. Because this is what I've heard that people talk about. You're
talking about a 1 ounce cigarette. I mean, you're talking like a cannabis cigar.
All right. So somebody would have to have something, a certain weight or amount for it would be considered a felony.
Or they would have to be selling it. Yeah.
Okay. Or selling it. Now, let's move into Virginia with the new laws now that they are in Virginia. What can people do and what they can't do with cannabis? What they did get passed?
Well, we passed it and then it just got changed last session a little bit because the governor and in the legislature to some extent wanted to regulate Delta 8. And so, which is synthetic cannabis. But going forward, if you're over 21, remember over 21,
right? Like alcohol.
Yeah, right. You're allowed to possess up to 4 ounces or less in public. It was originally up to a pound, but then that got reduced as part of the Delta 8 bill to 4 ounces. 4 ounces to a pound is, I believe, a misdemeanor, but under 4 ounces is totally legal. You're not allowed to smoke in public. You can smoke on your own property, but not in public. You can't go out on the street and do it. You can't
drink on the streets either, just in New Orleans.
That's exactly. You got to. That's what people need to think of. People need to think of it exactly like they think of alcohol. If you can't do it with alcohol, then you can't do it with cannabis. So you can't have it
while you're driving. You can't do it while you're in public. Those sorts.
Or you can't have an open container of it in your car.
Exactly. If it is open, it's got to be in a compartment in your trunk or something, with a sealed cap or something.
Right. Yeah, exactly. So, and you can't have it in school. You can't have it on a school bus.
Right.
You can't sell it to people. Adults are allowed to share it.
But they can't sell it.
Can't sell it. You also are allowed to grow up to 4 plants in your home. You have to have a tag on it with your name on it. But there's some rules about that.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
If it's in your house, you still need a name. You need to tag it, huh?
Well, because, you never know whose it is, and different roommates could have their own, and you don't want to get, fight about it.
Well, see, I never thought about that. If you do have roommates, everybody gets to have their own plant per se. That's with their name.
Right. Right. So that's a little bit of what we did on that. And it's a lot, I think, a lot saner than what we had before, and the number of arrests has gone just way, way, way down. I mean,
Well,
way
you
down.
know, cannabis is medicine. So you also have these, what do you call it, medical dispensary cards, where people have a prescription that they can take to one of these license. Go ahead, explain it, Scott. You know, so tell the people what it's about, how it happens.
Okay, well, Virginia, what we did is we authorized 5 licensees to open medical dispensaries around the state in 5 different regions. And the dispensary license in Northern Virginia went to a company called Jushi, which his trade name is Beyond Hello.
Right there on Route 1 up the street.
They're
close to
their mothership. Yeah, that's right. Well, their mothership is the mothership's in Manassas.
Right.
And their flagship store is right at the Wilson Bridge and Route 1, right by Oarsman Dodge and all that.
Right.
They've also got a new one they just opened in the city of Fairfax. I believe they're opening one in Woodbridge, and I believe they're opening 5 around.
Are many of those 5 licenses owned by, from an equity perspective, by African-American companies?
No, it's owned by this Jushi company.
Well, I know who Juicy is, but are any of the licenses that were granted?
I don't know that. I don't know the answer to that.
Well, they're not, far as I know.
Yeah.
But that's not the case. And a lot of small, and this goes back to people saying, well, why are you asking? Because this goes back to small business equity and small business. Because people heard me earlier, last year was $2 billion in sales. This year is $3 billion in sales. Folks, we're not talking about peanuts here. This is a lot of money that could be going to small businesses, that could be helping out a lot of minority businesses. But if the politicians aren't making sure there's an equity and expungement piece, then this needs to happen. So now that going into the into the next session, there's nothing about retail, and there's nothing about
no. And I was going to get into that about 15 minutes ago. And
yeah, but I'm sorry. Go ahead, Scott. Get into it, man.
No, we got sidetracked a little bit, but really quick, back to a minute ago. The way it works at the medical place is you don't get a prescription, because if a doctor writes a prescription for marijuana, they lose their prescription writing privileges under federal law. So what they do is they write you a recommendation.
Okay.
You take the recommendation with your card, then you go and you can buy it. It's pretty cool. They've got gummies, they got flowers, they got flour you can smoke, they got all that stuff. They got vapes. And you sit down, you meet with a pharmacist. You tell the pharmacist, here's what's going on with me. They make recommendations. They tell you, here's what we got. And then you can work through all that. It's kind of interesting. But to what you're just bringing up here about the retail sale piece. So a lot of the stuff that we were working on that caused the bill to sort of freeze was, how do we accomplish the equity components that we were looking to get accomplished without running afoul of the equal protection and provisions of the Constitution that say we can't make race-based decisions.
Well, and the United States is based off a race-based decision. That doesn't make sense.
Well, you got the United States. Well, listen, we got the United States Supreme Court that's about to blow up affirmative action, right?
I know, exactly.
So you can't put in. You're not allowed to put in a law that X percent has to go to a certain community, and so we had to try and figure out different ways to do that. And that was some of the stuff we were working on that was causing issues. And we were trying to figure out a way to ensure that first of all, we were having a 3-tiered system.
Right.
Top tier is growing, middle tier is manufacturing, bottom tier is retail. And we wanted to make sure we had diverse ownership at all 3 levels of the distribution, right? And then you have to decide how much equity do you want amongst licenses at each level, and perhaps even by region or whatever. And trying to tease all that out, we couldn't even figure out how many licenses you want to have. I mean, some people said, well, let's just have as many stores we have ABC stores. That's a good measure. Like, why?
Well, Virginia doesn't need to reinvent the wheel. There's lots of other states who have come up with some pretty good ideas, and some that came up with very bad ideas that have worked out. So
that's why we're
23 states, the ones who've kind of figured it out, those are the sort of the modeling, I think, that the politicians, and I guess the folks who are talking to the politicians, want to get them to say, hey, you don't have to reinvent this wheel. There's precedents for you to follow.
And Mark, that's a lot of that stuff is why we got bogged down, was trying to figure out who did it right and who did it wrong, and what exactly would work in Virginia.
Mm-hmm.
And we didn't want to set up a system that would fail. We didn't want to set up a bunch of people licenses that where they'd lose money or wouldn't be able to make it.
Right.
So we couldn't figure out, and there were some other companies that wanted a little bit of vertical integration. They wanted to be able to grow and manufacture, because they say that would get better product quality. And, we were sort of pushing back on that. There are also hemp farmers that want to be able to grow, but then if you have bees that go between cannabis plants and hemp plants, it can carry the pollen and make the hemp gut hot. They call it getting hot. If the pollen gets contaminated because the bugs are flying around between the two.
Yeah, but a lot of the places are growing everything indoors, and they have complete control over that process.
Most of them are indoors now. That's right.
Right, exactly. So what I wanted to ask you, though, these are the sort of things where I guess you just, from a small business perspective, the state really and our politicians really need to have an opportunity to get this right, which could change and empower a lot of folks. And a lot of people think the dispensaries for medical use is really where the opportunities are in this business. But what people really don't know, and I'm happy to tell them here on the internet, it's really in the pharmaceutical side of this business is where there are lots of opportunities for growth, and a lot of companies doing a lot of good things, because cannabis is medicine, and it is going to replace the cannabinoids, a lot of the opioids. So, and that is legitimate business, especially once the federal government takes it off of being a class one. Class one means it has no medical value, but everybody knows at this point, the science has said, well, it clearly CBD and CBN, other type of cannabinoids, have a lot of medical value. That is the reason why Cresco Labs, which is a pharmaceutical company, purchased, what was this place called? Columbia Care for $6 billion. So why is a pharmaceutical company busy purchasing dispensaries? For a reason. Right. Yeah, right. So all these sorts of things, and these are opportunities for small business to get in on the ground floor.
I agree, but the reason we haven't been able to pass retail sale since the Republicans took over is that they don't have the same views on this equity stuff as we do, and from their perspective, their views of equity are what's in it for the depressed parts of the state, like South Side and Southwest, and how can we ensure that they get some equity, and so trying to reach that balance is not easy. Plus, they have a much more of their caucuses that just don't like the idea, period. And so it's a matter of finding the people over there we can work with and getting enough of them to work with the rest of us to try to find a compromise. And plus you got the governor at the table who probably doesn't like this either. He's never really said. And so it's become a real mess trying to reach a compromise on it.
Well, I think it's going to really take Democrats really being able to get control of the branches of government in Virginia in order to pass something good and sort of push it through.
Say hi to my wife.
Yeah. Hey, everybody comes through when this is what you see on live internet. But so let's go. Can I move you towards voting rights and why voting rights are so important? And I'll just do my little spiel now. I know I've had you on. I said a half hour. That's almost an hour. I got 2 questions left to ask you. It's important that voting rights happen and they stay in place. We do have great voting rights laws in Virginia, but one of the things what we wanted to have in place is we can pass policies that are good for all Virginians and people across the country. So I'm going to first, Scott, ask you to tell me what's your view on voting rights. How do you think the state of Virginia is doing, and what do you think we ought to be doing going forward across the country?
First of all, I think we ought to do everything we can to ensure that it's easy as possible for people to vote, and to try and encourage every Virginian who's eligible to vote. Make all that as easy as possible. And I'm really excited. Virginia went from being like the 48th worst in the country on voting rights to like in the top 10 or something, like in the 2 years when we had the majority. And we did that through a few different things. Number one, we got rid of excuses for early voting. Number two, we created a permanent absentee list. So when you vote early, you can sign up to get your vote by mail every year. We also created the longest early voting period in America. It's now about a 45-day early voting period, which makes it a lot easier to vote early. We also authorized drop boxes. which make it a lot easier for people to skip the line. You get your ballot mailed at home, and you go and you turn it in the drop box, and you're done. You don't have to wait in line anymore. We created same-day voter registration, which if you were looking at the data from Tuesday, I think about 40 or 50,000 people took advantage of that on election day, which to me is amazing. And in fact, it appears that the people who took the most advantage of it were college students, because in the college towns that had some of the highest numbers of absentee of provisional voting, same-day voter registration of anybody in the state. We also passed pre-registration, so that if you're 16 years old, you can register to vote, so that when you turn 18, it just automatically kicks in. So you don't have to remember to sign up on your 18th birthday, or sometimes people sign up when they're 17. I'm not going to get into that, but you can. You just can't vote unless it's a primary. But anyway, but we passed all those laws and made it a lot easier. We also put on the early voting by mail, we put postage prepaid envelopes, so that you don't have to have a stamp to send your ballot back in anymore. And all of these things have really caused turnouts to go up. And I think that's a big reason why you saw the turnout so high in the election last week. The one thing that we did not get done, which I really wish we had been able to get done, was we wanted to put a constitutional right to vote in the Constitution of Virginia. Senator Mamie Locke carried that bill, and we passed it when we had the majority. But under the Constitution of Virginia, for the Constitution to get amended, it has to pass one session, then you have to have an election, then you have to pass it again on the next session. And the Republicans took the majority the following session, and so far they have refused to pass that constitutional amendment. We could actually pass it. We could actually try one more time this session. And if they were to pass it this session, it would then go on the ballot for the voters to approve up or down the following year. It would be in the 2023 election or the 2024 election. But in any event, the 2023 election. But that was the one thing we didn't get done. Oh, one other thing we did, which I'm really excited about. Senator Jennifer McClellan carried a bill with Delegate Sia Price, which created a sort of state level voting rights act, which allows the Attorney General to bring an enforcement action against the locality for diminishing people's voting rights if they see that happening. I'd be surprised if our current Attorney General uses that authority.
Yeah,
but I wouldn't be surprised if a future Attorney General uses that authority. But that's another thing we did, which I think will make a big difference. So that's some of the stuff we did on voting, and some of the stuff I'm really excited about.
Well, Scott, I want to say that we did such a great job on voting that we actually made it possible for us not to be in all control of all the statewide offices, because we have made it easiest to vote. I think there's maybe only one other state in the union, and maybe California, I think it is, that has more liberal voting right laws and nothing in the way of people giving them the opportunity to vote. So I just want to take this time to thank you and all the Democrats. You got that done, and you need to have the applause for getting that done, man, because that really helped. really helped. Let's hear it a little bit louder. Fantastic. So one more question. I know I've kept you here for a longer period of time than what I intended, but what I do want to ask you is what I ask all folks. If you were king for a day and you had an opportunity to wave that scepter of yours and anything you say could get done, what is it that you would actually do?
That's a really good question. I'm sort of torn about that. I think we have a lot of work left to do on our criminal justice system, Mark. I'm not happy about the number of mandatory minimum sentences we have in the books. I'd love to get some form of parole reinstated. You know, we over-incarcerate people in Virginia tremendously still. We made a lot of progress in 2020 in our special session, but those to me are two big things I wish we could have gotten done. But again, they're big things that take a lot of time to get done. I was really I forgot to mention that I carried the bill to repeal the death penalty. I keep forgetting about that, but that was a big accomplishment I'm super proud of. But the other piece I would say, I would sort of be torn between the criminal justice stuff and doing something about our tax code, because our tax code is really antiquated and out of date. You know, our highest tax bracket in Virginia is $17,000. I mean, that's crazy. You know, that's our highest tax bracket. We really ought to have a more progressive income tax that really taxes wealthier people more than it taxes working people. And we need to do things like reinstate the estate tax. I would like to see that reinstated. We never should have repealed it when we did. I wasn't in the legislature when we did, but we never should have repealed that. So I think there's a lot more we could do to have a fairer tax system so that we have more stable revenues to do the good things we need to do, like pay for our teachers and healthcare and our social safety net, where we just don't have the resources right now. So those are my two things. I'm not sure which way I weigh those two, but I can't believe I forgot to mention that I got the death penalty repealed when you were asking me about my big accomplishments. But in any event,
that's a big accomplishment for Democrats and for yourself. And Scott, I just want to say one thing. I appreciate, you coming on and spending some time with us, and we've come to more than the end of our hour. I'm glad we had an opportunity to do this makeup show. So I just want to say thank you. We want to have you back on the Virginia Democratic Small Business Caucus show live. We'll get you again, Scott. Thank you for being here, man.
Thanks for having me, Mark.
Take care, my friend. Bye-bye.
Yeah.